At my wife's funeral, my son said, "Not worth my time." A week later, he begged, "Dad, the mortgage hasn't been paid." I answered, "I don't care anymore." What happened between the grave and that call turned love into a boundary and ended with a knock that changed everything. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. Rain stitched the morning into gray as I stood beside Margaret's casket, phone buzzing in my palm, thumb sore from unanswered calls. Under the canopy, the lilies trembled, and I tried Timothy again, breath catching while my hand shook against polished oak. 4 rings, 5, 6. Then his voice, bright with laughter and distant music, waves hiding under the line. "Timothy, the ceremony starts in 30 minutes. Where are you?" A pause long enough to feel cruel. He said it like a shrug. "This whole thing isn't worth my time." The word time landed heavier than the rain. I stared at the phone's black screen, at my reflection bent over what love had built, and felt something colder than weather move through my chest. The service began without him. We buried Margaret with the truth unspoken and the lie everyone preferred. A week after the burial, he begged, "Dad, the mortgage hasn't been paid." His voice had lost the beach and found panic. He wanted me to fix it, to reset the transfer, to carry him one more month. I walked through the quiet house, past her glasses by the crossword, past the mug that still held the shape of her hand, and I finally said what grief had taught me to say. "I don't care anymore." The line went silent, then cracked into anger, then pleas, then promises I had heard too many times to believe. I set the phone on the table next to the deed with Margaret's name printed in steadier ink than any text message. Here is the rest of it. How a father walked from sorrow to enforcement without shouting. How bank pages and dates told the truth louder than apologies. How 2 clicks ended 8 years of enablement. And why the hardest word in love is no. If you have ever mistaken silence for kindness, stay. Between a son's vacation and a father's decision, there is a lesson about boundaries, about what love is and what it isn't. This is what happened between that sentence at a funeral and the knock of consequence that followed. The last year of Margaret's life looked ordinary from far away and careful up close. Her classroom still smelled like markers and paper. Small hands waved and she taped notes to worn folders. In the afternoons, she walked the garden even when wind made her eyes water, naming buds like a teacher taking attendance. A blue scarf lived on the dining chair as if breath had paused there. On that same chair, I learned medications and meal charts, morning pills with toast, midday with broth, evening with tea. I kept times in pencil, then in pen, until the routine felt like prayer that steadied. At night, the house settled and our lists kept us upright. Margaret touched the scarf and asked what the forecast meant for roses. I marked the next appointment and noted when nausea usually spiked. She apologized for asking me to repeat instructions, as if memory should stay strong while her body failed. I told her it was nothing, because it was nothing compared to what she carried. Sometimes the old light returned, the way she corrected my commas in a note to the pharmacy, the way she hummed while folding towels. We would sit quietly, letting spoons cool soup and believe tomorrow might be kinder. Timothy's calls shortened the way winter shortens daylight. At first, he asked about her energy and promised to visit soon. Soon became after the quarter closes, then after a launch, then after his anniversary trip with Sarah. Video chats that once showed his whole face began to show only his forehead angled toward another screen. When he did fly home in those early months, he arrived with expensive flowers and a strict schedule. 2 hours on Saturday, brunch with colleagues afterward, flight at 6. He loved us, he said, but work was brutal. Love began sounding like calendar slots he rented by the hour. Truly, support had always been our habit. When Timothy moved to New York, we helped with the deposit for the apartment he could not afford yet. It was supposed to be for now. When he married, we sent a lump sum to ease the new mortgage while he found his footing. For now. When the bank added automatic transfers, I set one for $3,200 each month and told myself it was temporary. For now turned into the way we lived. Promotions came, rooftop photos bloomed on their feeds, and still the transfer marched out on time like a soldier none of us questioned. I kept ledgers the way I kept promises. A notebook sat by the phone, and a spreadsheet lived on the old desktop. Neat columns recording mortgage transfers, flights we paid for and never used, gifts that stretched beyond birthdays into apologies for no-shows. I wrote not to accuse, but to see. Engineers do that. We find the slope, measure friction, and listen to what numbers say when talk runs in circles. Even then, I did not make the vow I needed. Margaret breathed hope. I breathed procedure, rows and receipts that let me avoid speaking the word stop when my mouth went dry. Aloud. Illness taught us to trade perfection for process. I timed the anti-nausea dose to precede breakfast by 30 minutes. I learned which cereal did not scrape her mouth after infusions. A tote stood by the door with a sweater, a blanket, lemon candy, lotion, and a notebook of questions for the oncologist. There was dignity in doing small things right. Margaret thanked me as if I were performing more than love. She worried about my sleep and touched my cheek with the same hand that graded essays for decades. In the mirror, I looked older and steadier, a man held together by lists and gentleness. Meanwhile, the phone lit from other places, rooftop dinners, client parties on a rented yacht, beach weekends where the water looked like polished stone. I tried not to resent it. People cope how they cope, Margaret would say, and I swallowed whatever rose to argue. She defended him with the soft authority she used on anxious students. He is afraid, she said. Death makes the very young into cowards. I pressed my thumb to the bank app and stared at the autopay tab. Courage is learned, I thought, learned by carrying weight, not delivered like flowers to a doorstep you rarely cross. In person. The house kept its own memory. Her scarf, her mug, the pencil jar with a tiny chip only we noticed. After clinic days, I came home first to warm the living room and arrange pillows. I emptied the mailbox and hid the insurance envelopes she hated seeing. I set out the blue bowl because that was the one oatmeal did not turn against her. I lined pill bottles by height so I could tell first and last dose by feel if the power failed. Inside such order, I kept waiting for the moment I would finally say enough. It did not arrive while she breathed. There were days when strength fooled us. Margaret walked the garden path and corrected my Latin names with a teacher's pleasure. She returned from school with handmade cards that smelled like glue and glitter. She told a story about a child who learned to read the word because, and cried when the syllables clicked. We ate soup at the table like any couple on an ordinary Tuesday. Then, the next morning, she could not keep water down. The scarf stayed on the chair, and the chair looked like someone waiting in a doorway who knows the answer already. Hope shrank but would not vanish completely. Money was not the only cost. Kindness steals from nights, from how a man stands in his kitchen, from the sound his name makes. I paid bills and carried hope. Steady deposits into Timothy's life did not grow gratitude. They trained him to expect deposits on schedule. I knew it and still let it continue, because stopping meant naming a truth I feared. In small hours, I opened the laptop like a watchman. The autopay tab sat pinned at the top. On the fridge, a cruise brochure for Greek islands waited blank for dates I had not yet dared to choose. For us both. The morning of the funeral arrived with a sky the color of old tin and a wind that smelled like wet stone. I parked by the gate and listened to the engine tick down. Margaret's scarf lay folded on the passenger seat. I touched the edge, slid my phone from my jacket pocket, and tapped Timothy's name at the top of the recent calls. 1 ring, 2, 3, 4, then voicemail. I ended the call and stared a moment at my reflection in the black glass. The funeral director approached with the practiced kindness of a man who has stood at many beginnings and endings. "Mr. Cole, we will start. Seating family in 15 minutes. I nodded and asked for an extra box of tissues for Aunt May. His black umbrella tilted into the rain as he moved away. I dialed again. The line rang into distance that sounded like air conditioning and laughter rather than a gate change or a car stuck in traffic. Cars eased down the lane one after another, dark silhouettes trailing water. Cousin Robert stepped out first, hat pulled low, tie already damp at the ends. He hugged me hard and asked if I had eaten. I said I had, and it was almost true. Behind him came two teachers from Margaret's school with a vase of lilies and handwritten cards. They said her students had started reading circles because she believed they could. I thanked them and felt the rain tilt harder. Under the tent, the seats looked fragile against the weather. The easel held a photo of Margaret taken in the garden, chin lifted, eyes warm. The lilies leaned toward the aisle. I checked my watch and dialed again. The phone pressed a mark into my palm. Timothy's voicemail began with that brisk tone he used for clients. "Leave it. I will call back as soon as I can." I ended the call without speaking. The pastor arrived with his Bible wrapped in a towel and a look that said we would make shelter out of words if we had to. He squeezed my shoulder and told me Margaret had chosen her passage well. I told him she had kept teaching even on days when nothing wanted to be learned. Rain streamed off the canvas in silver ropes. I stood at the edge of the tent and dialed again. 4 rings. 5. 6. Nothing. Aunt May's voice found me. "Where is Timothy?" Her eyes were already red. She dabbed at them and waited for my answer to hold. "He will be along," I said, and the lie tasted wrong in my mouth, like water gone flat. She patted my sleeve and went to the front row. When she turned away, I looked at Margaret's picture and felt the lie hang between us like a coat I could not carry. More family found their seats. The funeral director guided them with soft choreography. Someone whispered that the storm would pass and that Margaret would have made a joke about rain and gardens. The musician's bow lifted. I stood at the front row and then sat, hands locked around my phone. The pastor spoke Margaret's name. He began with her classroom. He looked at the photo and said the garden made sense of her because she believed things could bloom if tended. I listened and felt each sentence land and wanted to believe she could hear him. I wanted to believe Timothy would round the cedars any second and walk to the front. I dialed again. When the rings started, I counted them against my pulse. 1, 2, 3, 4. I lowered the phone and stared at the blank screen until it dulled the shape of my face. Aunt May reached for my hand and squeezed. Her glove was damp wool and comfort. "He will be along," she whispered, borrowing my lie and returning it wrapped like hope. I nodded for her sake and watched the aisle again. The pastor read the psalm Margaret had marked with a ribbon at her last appointment. "Surely goodness, surely mercy." The words felt like hands placed on my shoulders. The funeral director steadied a pole and nodded as if to say we were all right. My phone warmed in my grip. I did not put it away. I called again and heard only the measured rings and then silence. The principal from Margaret's school stepped forward with a folder that shook. She said Margaret believed in late bloomers. She said no child was a lost cause. I tried to hold those words like a shelter. The aisle remained empty. The rain kept time. I checked the path beyond the cedars. A car door thudded in the distance and I sat up straighter, but no steps followed. The pastor glanced at me and I nodded to begin the prayer. People bowed their heads. I kept my eyes open and fixed on the photograph and on the path where a sun should have been. The phone was a lifeline to no one, a talisman I gripped because it still connected me to the chance that he cared. "We will begin," the pastor said, and we did, with or without him. Rain stitched the silence between lines of scripture. I tucked the phone into my inner pocket and felt its weight like a small stone over my heart. Aunt May leaned her shoulder against mine. Cousin Robert sniffed and passed a handkerchief. The funeral director lifted his chin to the pallbearers. The service moved forward, because life always does. I kept my eyes on Margaret's picture until the words blurred, and the frame became just light and water and the face of the woman I loved. The pastor's prayer rose and fell with the rain when my phone buzzed against my ribs, a small tremor under the suit. I hoped for Timothy, late but moving, an apology forming as he ran up the path. Instead, I saw 3 notifications stacked like cards. Sarah had tagged me in a story. The thumbnail was a slab of impossible blue that did not belong to this gray morning. Maybe it was old, I told myself. People repost memories. I tapped with a thumb that had begun to shake. Color erupted. The speaker bled a lazy bar rhythm and sand-heavy laughter, a pool rimmed in white loungers, teal towels like flags. Sarah leaned into the microphone and sang her caption, "Perfect day in Miami." The location tag sat crisp beneath the frame. Miami Beach, Florida. Posted 17 minutes ago. The number appeared clean as a ledger entry and then refused to move. Behind it, a frozen drink rose into view. A paper umbrella stuck into a bright wedge. A tanned arm slid past the lens. Farther out, the ocean ran stripes. Turquoise, electric green, polished steel, like a neon sky poured onto water. Under our canvas, lilies trembled in a draft of cold air, white that belonged to hospitals and wedding dresses, not resort towels. Rain fretted the tent in small drums. The pastor spoke Margaret's name and slowed the syllables as if he could keep them in the world a second longer. Through my phone, a laugh I knew too well threaded the waves. Timothy, easy, coatless, sunny. I checked the timestamp again. 17 minutes. I slid through the ring of earlier clips, a balcony shot with palms rattling, a breakfast tray fanned with fruit, a mirror selfie with sunglasses, and a straw hat. The final ring glowed around the word Miami, the way the light glowed around Margaret's photograph on its easel. Something in me went hollow and loud. I set the phone face down on my knee, counted 3 breaths, and lifted it again. I watched the story once more, hunting for an angle that made it bearable. The timestamp did not blink. The number belonged to now. I raised my eyes to Margaret's picture and felt shame for how long I had bartered hope against fact. A seam in the canvas gave way, and a thin thread of water fell beside my shoe. Aunt May glanced at my hands, saw the phone, and touched my elbow. I slipped it into my pocket, heat blooming through the lining. The pastor shifted from memory to scripture. The principal waited with a folder of notes. The tent brightened and dimmed as wind huffed the canvas. I stood and stepped out of the row. The funeral director watched me angle toward the maintenance path and opened his umbrella a notch wider as permission. Behind the cedars, the ground softened to paste. The air smelled of gasoline and wet mulch. I followed the chain link to the cinder block shed and stood where the tent could not see me. I reopened the video. A sticker I had missed pulsed to life. We needed this. A pink heartbeat beside the words. The lens stuttered and caught Timothy's reflection in a sliding glass door, sunglasses, a V of fingers, a grin that belonged to someone unburdened. He disappeared again, a ghost crossing his own scene. I looked down at my shoes ringed with cemetery mud, white lilies and white loungers, canvas shade and palm shade, brass handles and stainless rails. Our morning worked in grays. Theirs had been edited until it burned. I checked my watch. The service had started 20 minutes ago. The story had gone up 17. Proof ends arguments you do not want to have. I scrolled higher, searching for the excuse I could live with. There was no holiday tag, no memory repost, no caption that softened the edges. Today's date sat in the corner like a stamp on a deed. A train horn reached across the lots and faded. Rain tapped the brim of my hat, then found my collar. I tried time zones as a mercy, the mind's courtroom looking for reasonable doubt. Miami sits an hour ahead of Chicago. The math still landed on the same square. Even if I granted him mine, the clip was fresh, our service already moving while their shadows shortened on the pool deck. Margaret used to tell her students that evidence is kindness because it frees you from pretending. The phone in my hand had turned into that kind of teacher. Another mercy tempted me. Maybe the autopost had cued. Maybe algorithm had chosen the hour. But the stories formed a chain that belonged to one morning, not memory. I thought of our chains, 8 years of transfers that went out on schedule even when the rest of life fell apart. I did not want anger to step into the tent with me. I wanted the service to keep its dignity. So I stood in the rain where no one could see face and chose to call him from there. I dialed Timothy. 1 ring, 2, 3, 4. I watched the pause frame of Sarah's drink and the bright wedge pinned to its side and felt my thumb bruise against the case. 5. Voicemail. I hung up and dialed again because you always knock harder when you see shadows moving behind the door. On the 6th try, he answered. Noise spilled through. Wind, blender, music, laughter turned to static. Dad, he said, flat. What? I looked back toward the tent and saw, through branches, the pale shape of Lily's and Aunt May's small hat. Where are you? I said, as if the question could change anything if asked right. A beat, then the tone he used for people he believed were being unreasonable. Busy. What do you need? The phone warmed my hand until it hurt. The service started 20 minutes ago, I said. Your mother's name is being spoken. He breathed against the microphone, and it came back as a burst of weather. He said nothing. The blender whined. A gull cried through the speaker. When he did speak, the words were careful, as if he had moved away from the bar a few steps. I can't make it, he said. I have important business. Rain crept down the back of my neck, cold and certain. I watched the ring around Sarah's profile crawl, seconds being spent where sun had no patience for our clouds. The app offered a reply box under the story and waited for me to type. I closed it and pressed the phone harder to my ear. Important business, I said. I let the phrase sit like a stone. He sighed, the sound of a man trapped in traffic. Don't make this harder. I'm doing what I can. Paint flaked from the shed wall against my shoulder. Somewhere behind me, a shovel touched stone. I set my jaw on the next sentence because anger wanted to say it for me. I looked again at the timestamp. 17 minutes when I opened it. 23 now. Time passing twice. On my side with rain, on his with sun. Timothy, I said, and waited until the music dipped so the words could land. Listen carefully. He made that old adolescent noise, half annoyance, half fatigue. What now, Dad? The line was alive, connected in every way that counted. I drew a breath that filled my lungs like a vow, and I spoke. I told him the truth first. Your mother's funeral is happening right now. Your name is on the program. Your chair is empty. I can hear music behind you. I can see the video Sarah posted. Miami. 17 minutes ago. He breathed into the phone. Dad, I can't do this. I have a life to live. It's not my fault the service is on a weekend I can't control. Your mother died on a Tuesday morning, I said. You had time. You had months. You had years to come while she was still here. Today is the last one. It cannot be moved. Then reschedule your grief, he said. Hold a small thing for family when I get back. I'll send flowers today. People will understand. I'm practical. The old training rose in me, the habit of smoothing for him. I swallowed it and kept my voice level. Practical is getting on a plane when your mother dies. Practical is standing in rain to say goodbye. I'm not asking you to be heroic. I'm asking you to tell the truth about what matters. I am telling the truth. he said. I can't be everywhere. I can't do everything. This isn't worth my time. We all mourn differently. I'll remember her as she was, not a box under a tent. That sentence struck like a slap. My jaw tightened. She was not a box. She was your mother. The person who drove through a snowstorm when you couldn't breathe in college. He sighed, long and theatrical. This is emotional manipulation, Dad. You want drama. I avoid drama. I handle facts. Fact is, I am not coming. I'm done discussing it. Rain slid off my hat brim and found my collar. I kept my voice quiet so it would not crack. Then hear one more fact. She asked for you every week. She watched the door. She checked her phone. She died on a Tuesday with your name in her mouth. I lied and said you were on a plane. He did not step toward the truth. He stepped backward into comfort. I'm sorry she's gone, but I refuse to be dragged into a scene that derails my life. I've got a life to live. You raised me to build one. That's what I'm doing. Something in me broke clean. The shout surprised me as much as it must have surprised him. You have a life because she gave you one. You have a future because she fed every past you ever burned. You do not get to use the life she built as a reason to leave her funeral. Silence pressed against the line. Then a clipped tone. Are you done? No, I said, and it came out with 20 years inside it. You are abandoning your mother. You are abandoning me. Do not dress it up as scheduling. Call it what it is. Cowardice. He pulled the word out like a thorn and threw it back. If I'm a coward, it's because you and Mom made me one. You bailed me out. You still do. If she taught me anything, it's that people should focus on the living. I am doing that. Then focus on this living man, I said. I am your father, and I am asking you to come. This is the last request I will make on this topic. Come say goodbye to your mother. No, he said, tidy as a shut door. And he hung up. I stared at the call-ended text. I called again. Voicemail. I called again. The number you are calling is not available. I called a third time. This caller has been blocked. I lowered the phone and leaned my head against the cool cinder block. Beyond the cedars, the pastor's voice thinned and gathered like a man cupping a candle. The service moved forward as if it knew how to. Walk without me. I dialed once more, heard the same recorded refusal, and tucked the phone away. I stood there and let a new grief climb into my chest. Not for Margaret. That grief already had a chair in every room. This was grief for the living, for a son who had chosen distance so many times the path back had grown over. It was grief for years I had padded for him, for flights I had paid for and excuses I had printed on good paper. It was grief for the part of me that believed love could hold a door open forever. I wiped my face and did not check whether it was rain or tears. I picked up the umbrella the director had leaned by the fence and walked back toward the tent. The canvas bellied and snapped. The lilies' white faces looked steadier than mine. The funeral director met my eyes and lifted his brows as if to ask whether I needed a minute more. I shook my head. I took my seat beside Aunt May. She pressed a tissue into my palm without looking at me. The pastor asked us to stand. We did. The prayer rose. I did not pray for Timothy. I prayed for clarity. The wind eased and the rain softened around us gently. The phone lay cold against my ribs. I left it there. In front of me, Margaret's picture watched over us, with the patience she had used on difficult children. I set my shoulders and listened to the names of her gifts, the stories of her quiet victories. When the time came to walk behind the casket, I rose and went where I was supposed to go. My feet knew the way. My heart learned it on the path. The pallbearers guided Margaret's casket over soaked turf, shoulders squared, breath white in the cold. We formed a half circle at the grave, while the pastor's voice laid boards over open earth. I watched the lilies bow and kept my hands locked. Cousin Robert eased beside me. He tipped his umbrella until it covered my shoulder and pressed a steady palm between my shoulder blades. "I've got you," he said. "After this, I'll drive. If you want me to check the furnace and the back door later, I will." Aunt May leaned in, tissue tight in her fist. "Traffic," she whispered. "Or the airline lost his bag. Timothy would never miss this on purpose." I saw the hope she needed and could not set a beach against it. I let her keep the story she could carry. The pastor invited prayer. We bowed. When the amen went soft, the director stepped back and the casket began to descend. Leather creaked, strap by strap. The sound was gentle and merciless. My chest seized and then released. Robert steadied my elbow. "Take your time," he murmured. "No schedule today." Aunt May stacked reasons aloud for a son's absence, building a wall against weather. Maybe he lost his phone. Maybe he's parking. I let her stack them. The truth would wreck what little shelter she had. Lily's went hand to hand. I laid mine on the pale lid. "Thank you," I told Margaret, and stepped back. Robert placed his, squeezed my shoulder again, and asked if I wanted him to stay. I said I would manage. He said managing didn't mean refusing company. We compromised. He would check the locks later and leave when I told him to. People drifted toward cars, heads down, shoes dark with mud. Aunt May lingered. "He will be devastated when he realizes this mix-up," she said. "We can hold a small service so he gets his goodbye." I heard Margaret's teacher voice. "Makeup work does not replace showing up." I told Aunt May to get warm. Thurman Hayes waited by his truck, hands in the pockets of a navy jacket that had seen weather. He nodded to the grave and then to me and walked over, boots sure in the mud. "Otis," he said, low and plain. "I'm sorry. She was the best of us." He looked at the lane. "Where's the boy?" he asked, not unkindly. I let the question sit. Finally, I said the part that would not break Aunt May's scaffolding. "He didn't come." Thurman's jaw tightened once. He nodded the way a foreman nods when a crewman doesn't show. "Some lessons," he said, "are only learned the hard way." He stood with me a while, letting thin rain find him. "My brother always needed saving," he said. "We bailed him until the bucket was our life. He never learned to swim because we never let him feel water." He looked at the slack ropes. "Don't do that to the boy. Not after this." I thought of 8 years of transfers leaving my account on time, the habit we named help and treated like weather. I thought of the phone warm against my ribs during the service, the scarf on the chair, the way Margaret defended him with a faith that turned itself inside out. "Grief makes ground soft," Thurman said. "If you wait, you'll pad the landing again. He will expect it. He will call it love." Robert returned to ask if I wanted a ride to the reception hall. I told him I needed a minute. He nodded at Thurman. They shook hands with the practiced grip of men who had seen me at my worst, and stayed. Aunt May came back, clung to my arm, and promised to keep calling Timothy until he picked up. "Let me try him," she said. "He loves his mother. He must be confused." I told her to go with Robert and drink something hot. She kissed my cheek and left her tissue in my palm. Thurman waited until we were alone again. "I saw you holding that phone like a rope," he said. "I can guess. I won't tell you what to do. I'll tell you what happened when I didn't. My brother lost his house, then blamed us for not saving it sooner. We saved him 3 times, which is why he was surprised. Surprise is what happens when consequence arrives." The wind pushed a ribbon of rain down my collar. "What would you do?" I asked. "Stop insulating him," Thurman said. "Let the shape of his choices be his education. Do it now, while the lesson still fits the day." I looked at the grave. The sentence settled in me like a level finding true. Thurman gripped my forearm and let go. "Call me if you need a witness," he said. "I will say what I saw. A good woman was honored." a son absent, truth finally speaking. Today, we started toward the cars, the mud, trying to keep our heels. The sky in the west began to pale, not a promise, a path. The house met me with a quiet deliberate, like a page turned and held. I closed the door and listened to the furnace breathe. Damp air followed me down the hall, carrying cemetery rain and lilies. In the kitchen, Margaret's mug sat upside down in the dish rack. A ring of water darkened the wood. Her glasses waited by the crossword, a pen tucked at a half-finished grid. I straightened both, then faced the chair with her blue scarf. I carried the laptop to the table and set it beside the folder from the cemetery. The charger snaked from the outlet. I opened the lid, watched the familiar slow light, and typed the password I had not changed since her diagnosis. The browser opened to tabs I had left for weeks. Insurance portal, pharmacy messages, bank homepage. The autopay tab sat pinned at the left, like a thumb marking a page I stubbornly refused to finish today. The site asked for a code. I turned my phone back on, declined 3 unknown numbers, and read 6 digits from the text. The dashboard arrived, orderly, checking balance, savings, mortgage on our house. I clicked transfers, then recurring. The list loaded with the calm of a machine that never doubts itself. Monthly transfer to Timothy Cole mortgage account. Amount $3,200. Schedule the 30th each month or next business day. Status active. Payment history waited beneath quietly. I opened it. Rows stepped down the screen in steady order, each one a month I could name without reading the date. 96 entries, each marked completed. The first line read May 2017. I slowed my scroll. June, July, August. On and on, a metronome that had outlived the song. Sometimes the posting slid by a day. Sometimes the note field said, rent. At the bottom, a subtotal waited like a verdict. About $300,000. My chair creaked when I leaned back. The number was not a surprise, and still it altered the room. I opened the calculator out of habit and ran the figures as if belief required double entry. 3,200 times 12 times 8. The answer matched the subtotal like a mirror. We had built an invisible wing onto our son's life and paid heat and light for 8 winters. The ledger had always told the truth. I preferred story. I clicked the first receipt. A confirmation number sat at the top, and my memo line stared back with bland conviction. Helping until he is established. I closed it and opened my email. The search bar offered history. Timothy 2017. Mortgage, an old thread surfaced. Subject, a big ask. He wrote about a brutal market and said a few months would get them over the hump. I promise to pay you back once I am established, he wrote. He used the word again in the next note, capitalized as if establishment were a city whose gates might swing open any day. Sarah attached a photograph, keys in her palm, a new door behind. Them, smiles bright, with relief. First home, first chapter. Margaret cried happy tears when we opened it. I replied with logistics, the way I always did, and set the first transfer on a calendar without touching the question that should have come first, at all. I scrolled through later messages, promotions, anniversaries, flight confirmations for visits that shortened and then stopped. Between those bulletins ran the quiet river of money, monthly and unquestioned. The bank records did not show the nights Margaret stayed up folding his old jerseys for a donation box she never managed to take to the store. They did not show the way she turned her phone face down so I would not see her waiting. Numbers cannot grieve, but they accuse. I opened my ledger spreadsheet, the one with more color than it needed, because seeing helped me tell the truth. I added a line for today and entered the subtotal. I added a line for funeral expenses and another for the savings account I renamed yesterday without noticing. European Cruise Fund. A blank brochure for the Greek islands clung to the refrigerator with a lighthouse magnet. She left the date line empty, as if invitation were part of the gift. I let the cursor blink in the notes column until the word formed on its own. Enabling. I do not like that word. It turns people into problems, and problems into labels. But accuracy matters. Generosity is a choice you make. Enabling is a system you forget you built. You lay a pipeline under the ground and call it the water table. People stop asking who turns the valve. They plan showers around a resource never meant to be right. I looked at the photograph of Margaret on the fridge, her fingers stained with soil, eyes bright because the tomatoes finally took. She loved beginnings, and she loved fairness. Kindness with edges, she told her fourth graders when they confused nice with good. If she were here, she would remind me that fairness counts everyone, including the person writing the checks. Love that never says no, stops telling the truth, she would say. Be brave now, Otis. Please now. Today. I spoke aloud to test my voice in this house without her. We helped our son. He did not grow. We funded his life. He did not step into ours when it cost him. We called it support, and it became a salary. We called it patience, and it became avoidance. He promised to repay once established and remained a construction site when presence was required. Salary and title arrived. The qualities that mattered did not. Presence, duty, and honor. Anger rose and tried to burn. I did not let it. I let it cool into something more useful. Clarity. I selected the payment history, copied it into a local file, and saved it with a name I would remember when doubt returned. I printed the last page and slid it into the folder already holding the deed, the utilities, and funeral invoices. Paper is plain spoken. It does not lose battery. It lends courage by being weight in hand now. Back at the bank page, the Manage button waited. I set my finger above it and did not press. A decision can be made long before it is enacted, like a bridge decided before steel rises. Thurman's voice moved through the room. Let the shape of his choices be his education. Margaret's voice answered. Keep the house a place of peace, not chaos. I looked at the mug, the glasses, the crossword, and felt the room ask for a boundary. I closed the laptop without clicking. Not yet. I wanted the choice steady, not reactive. I brewed coffee and drank it at the table where we planned December gifts, running my thumb along the groove her mug left. Then I reopened the computer and stared at the same blue button until my breathing matched the soft sounds of the furnace. The ledger had woken, and with it, the part of me that knew numbers are instructions. Stop here. Turn now. I reopened the bank page and let the cursor hover over Manage like a fingertip on a door I had already chosen. Click. A small window rose with its final warning, simple and exact. This action cannot be undone. I read it twice, not for clarity but for courage, and felt the house listen for my answer. Margaret would have told her students that understanding comes first, then decision. I took one breath, cooled my coffee with another, and placed my palm flat on the table so my hand would move for love, not anger. I pictured the casket lowering, the strap creaking. I pictured sun on a pool I had not asked to see. The contrast steadied me the way levelers do when a frame wobbles. I pressed confirm. The wheel spun and became a green banner that neither gloated nor apologized. Recurring payment canceled. Effective immediately. The line that had marched for 8 years now read inactive. A note blinked into the account history in plain type. User-initiated cancellation recorded at 2:11 p.m. My phone chimed with a bell I had tuned out for months, and the email arrived like a receipt after a long wait. Payment cancellation confirmed. I stared until the words separated from fear and settled into fact. Regret did not come. Space did. My chest moved all the way for the first time in too long. The quiet in the kitchen changed, no longer heavy, present. I saved the file with the 96 transfers, closed the tab, and opened new savings account we had named last night. European Cruise Fund. It looked less like escape and more like a promise kept on someone's behalf. I decided to fund it on the day the transfer would have left. Each month, a small memorial that built forward. Hunger knocked. I cracked 3 eggs into the blue bowl and whisked until yellow turned satin. Butter softened in the pan and spoke in a low whisper. Toast rose and browned. I set our wedding plates on the table because Margaret once said they were for everyday courage. I sat and ate and tasted everything. The kitchen wanted me again. No buzzing phone, no calendar hijacked by someone else's crisis. I poured a second cup and finished it hot. Between bites, I wrote 3 lines on a card near the ledger. Boundaries keep love honest. Help is a bridge, not a residence. Silence is not kindness. I tucked the card against the sugar jar where old habits liked to visit. Then I rinsed the pan and left it to dry beside Margaret's mug. The blue scarf on the chair looked less like a remnant and more like a ribbon marking passage. I opened 2 windows in the living room and let winter air rinse the rooms. I turned on the lamp with the warm shade, sat in Margaret's chair, and opened a book I had been pretending to read for weeks. The sentences met me and held. I read a chapter without checking the bank or the clock. The present, for once, was enough. When I finished, I walked the hallway and straightened frames. One hung crooked over the radiator. I wrote the handyman's number on a sticky note. Tomorrow. True again. Twilight laid a soft gray across the garden. I watered the fern and filled the feeder. A cardinal arrived like punctuation in red. I chose tomorrow's clothes and folded them on the chair, a quiet message to myself that grief is work and deserves the dignity of readiness. I phoned Robert to say the locks were fine and thanked him. I texted Aunt May a simple home safe and left it at that. When night came, it did not fall. It settled. I powered down the laptop, placed the phone face down, and turned off lamps one by one. In the bedroom, I changed the sheets because new cotton sounds like beginning. I set Margaret's photo on the nightstand and told her what I had done. You asked me to keep the house a place of peace, I said. This was the cost, and I paid it. She would have asked first, did you eat? I smiled and said yes. I slid into bed and waited for the parade of what if to march. It never formed. My jaw unclenched, my hands loosened. The window breathed a thin cold in and let warm out. A train announced itself somewhere far and then disappeared. I did not rehearse arguments. I did not script calls. I did not bargain with future versions of my son. I let the day end on the line that had steadied my hand. This action cannot be undone. Good, I said into the dark. Some things should hold. Sleep came without pictures. No hospital ceilings, no banking screens, no balcony glare. I went under like a boat whose anchor had finally caught. When I woke once, I did not reach for the phone. I turned the pillow to the cool side and drifted again. Dawn found me, rested for the first time since the doctor said the word spread. The furnace hummed. The house sounded like itself. And my first thought was not panic or money or what excuse Timothy would make next. My first thought was breakfast, and then the garden, and then the simple relief of a day that would be mine to spend well. A week slid by with mornings that belonged to me again. On Thursday afternoon, the phone buzzes with a name I used to wait for. Timothy, I answer. Hey, Dad, he says, casual. Weird thing. My bank says the mortgage payment didn't arrive. Your transfer must have glitched. It wasn't a glitch, I say. A blink of silence. Okay, well, whatever you did, can you fix it? Late fees hit after 10 days. I'm sure it's just some setting. I changed the setting, I say, on purpose. He laughs lightly, the chuckle meant to sand edges. On purpose? Come on, this is automatic. You've always sent it on the 30th. Did the bank switch interfaces again? You hate their updates. No, I say. I canceled the payment. Silence, then confidence. That's not. Why would you do that without telling me? I've got drafts scheduled around that transfer. Resend it today and we'll pretend the glitch never happened. It wasn't a glitch, I repeat. He pivots. I'm not mad. I'm just surprised. Look, Dad, this is money. This is real. Mortgages don't care about feelings. Let's keep emotions out of it and handle the bill. Your mother was real, I say. The line empties. He breathes once, then goes practical. I understand you're upset. I am too. I've been processing everything. But the bank doesn't process. It penalizes. If the payment posts by Friday, no harm done. Send it from savings. Just this once and we'll talk Sunday. Just this once, I say, and let the words show their age. 8 years of just this once. Dad, that's not fair. You offered. You promised. You said, until I was established. You said you'd repay, once you were established, I say. The word established has lived in our house longer than you have. He exhales. Look, I had to move fast. The market's brutal. You wanted me to succeed. This was investment in my future. It worked. I'm doing well, but cash flow ebbs. Bonuses come later. You make 6 figures, I say. He bristles. So you're watching my life now? Anyway, this is a system. You're part of it. We've always worked as a family team. We did, I say, while your mother lived. The system ends now. He softens. Dad, don't do this today. I'm grieving. I needed time to process. I'm here now, taking care of things. Help me with this and we can reconnect next week. We'll plan a memorial dinner that fits everyone. I'll make it right. Your mother is in the ground, I say. The schedule was last week. Presents was the bill due. You chose not to pay it. That's cruel, he says. I couldn't handle seeing her like that. I wanted to remember her strong. What good would it have done to watch her be lowered? I'd be wrecked and still have to show up Monday. What good did it do your mother to look at the door and not see you? I ask. What good did it do me to tell her you were on a plane? He stiffens. This is spiraling. Let's be adults. The mortgage is due. Either you value my stability or you don't. If you pull support now, you're sabotaging me after everything you've invested. I am ending a subsidy, I say. Call the bank. Negotiate a grace period. Move funds like any other adult. This problem is yours to solve. You can't just flip a switch and expect me to absorb $3,000, he says, voice rising. Do you even understand how budgets work here? My credit will take a hit. The landlord will. The landlord is you, I say. You own the apartment. Sell the watch. Cut a trip. Cook at home. Ask your employer for an advance. He goes quiet, then bargains. Fine. Half. Send half. I'll cover the rest. Meet me part way so nobody suffers. Nobody suffered for 8 years, I say. Your mother and I did the math. We chose generosity and called it love. It became something else. This is punishment, he snaps. You want me to feel what you felt at the funeral. You want revenge. I want truth, I say. Truth is that your mortgage isn't worth my time anymore. Another silence, heavier. He makes a small sound I recognize from childhood when reality first pushed back. This is unbelievable. After all you preached about family, you're really cutting me off because of one bad week? One bad week is a ledger of years, I say. The number sits in the bank records. The absence sat in the front row. Both are real. I am done buying a version of you that doesn't have to grow. He retreats to certainty. You'll change your mind. You always do. You hate conflict. You'll wire it by 5. No, I say. He tries to move it. Text me the login. I'll set it up myself. I'll reimburse you next month. We can automate a different route. There are solutions. There are, I say, and they all live on your side of the line now. His breath quickens. Dad, be reasonable. This is money. This is real. Your mother was real, I say again, quiet and final. She was real when she asked for you, real when she died without your hand in hers. Reality is not a bill. It is a door you walk through or don't. He says nothing. Through the phone, I hear him realize there is no lever to pull. The calendar tilts. Panic begins. The sound of a coin dropped down a chute. He clears his throat and fails to find the script. I wait, and the silence grows teeth. The call comes from a number I do not recognize. I answer anyway. "Dad?" Timothy says, brisk and controlled. "I am using my work line. I want to resolve the mortgage issue like professionals. I can wire you a partial today, then we restructure the arrangement. $3,500 next month from me, the rest from you." The answer is still no, I say. He shifts to softening. "I overreacted last week. I said things I didn't mean. I was grieving badly. Miami was Sarah's idea, not mine." "Grief is not a beach," I say. "It is a chair by a bed. It is a phone you pick up. It is rain on a tent over your mother." Then guilt dressed as reason. "This is bigger than feelings. If I miss a payment, penalties cascade, credit score, notices. I raised you to tell the truth," I say. "Here is the truth. Your mother's funeral happened without you. For 8 years, your mortgage was paid by us, not you. When she was dying, you called less. When she died, you were in Miami. When I asked you to come, you blocked me. That is the ledger." He exhales. "That ledger ignores all the ways I worked to make you proud. Promotions. I was building a life. A life built on other people's deposits is not a life," I say. "It is a lobby. Sit long enough and you think the lobby is home." His voice hardens. "This is punishment? You want to hurt me because I could not handle the funeral. You are using money to teach a lesson." "I am not punishing you," I say, each word steady. "I am just no longer enabling you." He scoffs. Enabling. Families support each other. Parents help their children until they can fly. You and Mom taught me that love shows up with action, and money is action. Money can be action, I say. It stopped being love when it replaced responsibility. Your mother taught second graders to tie their shoes. Not one left her room expecting someone else to walk for them. He rushes ahead. Fine. Keep the lecture. Here is the practical reality. If I default, it hits my credit and limits work. If you refuse to help, you are choosing consequences. Consequences belong to the choices that create them, I say. You missed the funeral. You missed months of visits. You missed the call when she asked for you. I cannot carry your mortgage and your absence too. He pivots again. Dad, I loved Mom. I love you. Please do not do this to me. I will pay you back. But right now, I need you. I am asking as your son. You asked as a son. When it was easy, I say quietly. When it was hard, you asked no one. You let your mother ask the door for you. I will not let you ask my account. His breath gets ragged. So what now? You want me homeless? You want me humiliated? You want the story to be that my father made me lose my home after his wife died. The story is already written, I say. It is that your mother died and her son chose a vacation. The next chapter is yours. Call your bank. Call your employer. Rent smaller. Find a roommate. Sell a car. He drops the softness and comes with anger, bright and sharp. You cold man. You and Mom always judged me. This is your chance to prove you were right about me. Congratulations. I do not want victory, I say. I want peace. Your crisis is not mine. He tries one last bargain. 1 month, Dad. Just one. Then I transition. I will bring flowers to the cemetery. I will organize a memorial. I will show you I can be the man you want. Be the man your mother needed when she asked, I say, and let the sentence land. He changes tactics again. Legal tone, clipped. You can't cut off support without notice. That is bad faith. We had an understanding. We had a favor, I say. Favors end. Contracts are written. If you have a contract, send it. If you do not, stop pretending love is a clause. He pauses, then tries shame. People will hear about this. Family will talk. They will say I lost everything while my father watched. They will also hear about the funeral, I say. I am not hiding it. Neither should you. The line goes quiet. When he speaks again, his voice is smaller. I thought you would always catch me. I did, I say. That is why you never learn to land. There is a long inhale, and I can almost hear him set down pride to reach for a tool he has never used. Dad, teach me then. What do I do first? Call your bank today, I say. Ask for a hardship extension. Cut discretionary spending now. Make a real budget and keep it. Find a roommate within a week. Sell what you do not need. Do not take a vacation for 2 years. Pay what is yours to pay. And call your mother's grave before you call me again. He says nothing. He clears his throat. I hate you, he says quietly, like a boy. Then he hangs up. The screen shows call ended. I add his work number to the block list and watch the confirmation bloom. Contact blocked. The house exhales the way a tired animal settles. I set the phone face down and stand there a long time, not triumphant, not ruined, only honest, which is a kind of mercy no one can wire for you. The first week settled into simple work. I woke before the neighborhood and opened the back door to rinse the rooms with cold air. The garden answered light with a damp green smell that belonged to Margaret. I loosened soil around the roses she planted last spring and added compost the way she taught me, a ring away from the stem so the roots could find it without shock. I rinsed the bird feeder and filled it with seed. A cardinal arrived, then a pair of house finches, then a cautious chickadee that checked the fence and decided to trust me. Inside, the laptop showed a new savings line, European Cruise Fund, first deposit equal to the payment that no longer left. Numbers shifted from obligation to intention. On Tuesday, I carried her blue scarf to the nursery and asked about soil for Mediterranean herbs. The owner walked me past thyme, rosemary, and oregano, then broke a sprig until the lane smelled like the coast. I bought 3 pots and a bag of gravel, then built a sunny corner near the south fence. It was not Mykonos, but it borrowed the light. By Thursday, I had a routine that did not depend on dread. Coffee, garden, birds, a chapter, lunch. The silence held. I called the travel agency on Lincoln and made an appointment. The woman at the desk wore a gold ship's wheel and listened the way good teachers listen. I told her about Margaret and the pages she had folded. Santorini at dusk. A ferry to Naxos. She circled dates, checked a sailing, and guided my finger across a map of islands like stones. I left with a tentative itinerary. The second week brought bright mornings and 1 rain. I set the timer for the hose and let the new herbs learn their rhythm. I tightened the back gate and oiled the latch that had complained all winter. I baked a loaf with rosemary and orange zest, because Margaret once said a house should smell like welcome and supper. I ate 2 slices warm and gave half to Aunt May, who laughed at herself and asked for the recipe. At the agency, the agent spread brochures the color of seas I had only seen on postcards. She recommended a small cabin, near the bow so I could feel the ship breathe. She flagged notes. Santorini for the caldera, Naxos for quiet roads, Rhodes for old stones, Crete for olives. Take the earliest tender, she said. The light is gentler then. I told her Margaret liked mornings best, when birds woke the garden. She printed a hold confirmation and slid it across the desk. Each Saturday, I drove to the cemetery with roses wrapped in paper. I learned which florist cut them tight so they opened on the stone. I trimmed the stems and pressed them into the holder the grounds crew installed. I told Margaret about the cardinal, the bread, the travel agent who found a sailing that fit the tide of my courage. I admitted I still woke some nights reaching for the phone, fingers searching for emergencies that no longer belonged to me. By the 3rd week, the garden decided it could trust me. New growth brightened the canes, and the herb corner began to smell like a recipe book opened to summer. I walked back to the agency for final paperwork, and the agent laid out a map of permission, port by port. She suggested a quiet beach below Oya and a bakery in Cora where the owner measures flour with his palm. She showed me how to pronounce names so I would not step on them. Sunday came with an easy sky. I returned to the cemetery with roses instead of lilies. I knelt, brushed grit from the letters of her name, and set the blooms so their faces turned the way hers had in the garden. I told her about Thurman's advice and how it kept me from pouring one more month into a hole that never filled. I told her that boundaries felt like braces on a spine, awkward for a day and then right. I told her I was learning to cook for one. I set a small stone on the base and said, "See you next week." Between errands, the phone stayed quiet. I did not wait for Timothy's number. On the day the old transfer would have posted, I moved the same amount into the cruise fund and wrote "paid forward" on the memo line. I chose travel dates that matched the school calendar she used to love, late June into July, when mornings linger and evenings cool. The agent called to confirm the deposit, and I read the numbers aloud. After dinner, I walked the block and waved to neighbors who had left casseroles. I went to bed without checking balances or weather on any coast. Sleep came without negotiation, and morning arrived like a clean invoice marked received. The garden answered with patient, ordinary work daily. The 3 weeks returned me to someone I remembered, a man who liked the smell of bread and damp soil, a husband who could carry her memory without twisting himself into the shape of someone else's need. Each night, I set 2 plates on the table and then put one back. I moved the blue scarf from the chair to the closet and hung it where she kept it in spring. On the last evening of the 3rd week, I watched the cardinal flare and vanish. The feeder swayed once, then steadied. Inside the house, the air settled the same way, as if the walls finally believed that peace was the plan. The house is quiet and honest again, and in that quiet, I can finally say what I avoided while Margaret was sick and after the funeral. Silence isn't love. Boundaries are. I mistook holding my tongue for kindness, as if absorbing disrespect would spare everyone pain. It never did. Enabling does not announce itself with sirens. It arrives dressed as patience and practicality, with phrases like later and temporary and just until you're established. I helped our son because I loved him, and month by month I built a ramp so smooth he never learned to climb. The bill for that mistake didn't come from a bank. It came in the shape of an empty chair at a graveside. Boundaries are not punishment. They are the frame that keeps the picture true. Without a frame, everything leaks, and people begin to believe your yes is weather and your no is a rumor. Loving adult children as adults means inviting responsibility and declining subsidy when it replaces effort. It means saying, "I will help you plan, but I will not carry your plan." It means letting the calendar record absences instead of inventing presents. It means accepting that grief does not excuse abandonment. I used to think the loudest proof of love was uninterrupted giving. Margaret did too, because teaching trains you to leave no student behind. But she also taught edges. She made her 2nd graders sign their names to their work, own mistakes, try again. Somewhere between classroom and career, we forgot the lesson. We covered for missed assignments with deposits and called it care. We turned yes into a subscription and let it renew until it replaced character with convenience. When I canceled those payments, I didn't erase love. I erased permission for a story that kept us all from growing. The costs of enabling weren't only measured in dollars. They showed up in my posture, in the way I stood at windows counting taillights that never turned into our driveway. They showed up in the stories I told neighbors to hide a truth I hated, and in the way the house flinched whenever the phone rang. I can forgive myself for it without pretending it was love. Love tells the truth, even when the truth shrinks the guest list. I promised Margaret I would keep the house a place of peace, not chaos. Peace is not quiet at any price. Peace is order within mercy. It is the difference between a door that opens from welcome and a door that blows open because no one tends the latch. After the cancellation, the house exhaled. The kitchen stopped waiting for emergencies and started smelling like bread. Boundaries did that. They let me honor my wife's life by refusing to fund the part of our son's life that refused to honor her. Loving Timothy now means letting him meet himself without my money in the way. I can answer the phone with civility and still decline to fix what he breaks. I can say, here is a path. Call your bank, cut expenses, sell what you do, not need, and show up to the next obligation that asks for presence instead of wire transfers. If he succeeds, good. If he fails, the lesson won't be stolen by my intervention. I will not buy him out of consequences he earned. I will not sell my peace to purchase his comfort. There are hidden costs to enabling that compound like interest. Resentment accrues in the lender and entitlement accrues in the borrower. Roles blur. Public lies multiply to keep the performance running. People you love learn to love your resources more than your presence, and you begin to disappear behind your yes. The remedy is simple and hard. Tell the truth and stand there while it works. The truth is unspectacular. It uses small words, your choices, your consequences. I keep a card by the sugar jar now. Boundaries keep love honest. Help is a bridge, not a residence. Silence is not kindness. Each line steadies me when old reflexes knock. If guilt visits, I walk to the garden and say her name, and the air corrects me. Margaret spent her career teaching children how to stand inside their own names. She would understand that I am trying to stand inside mine. Grief taught me something stern and clean. Choice makes character, and character makes family. Money can make a household run, but it cannot make a home. A home is made by truth, spoken gently, by doors that close as needed, by chairs kept for people who show up when it is hard. I cannot rewrite the funeral mourning. I can write the days after. I can keep the promise I spoke by her grave. This house will be a place of peace. The phone will not own my heart. My yes will mean yes again. My no will be clear and calm. Love remains, smaller in volume and larger in value, because it is trimmed to what is true. If Timothy ever asks for wisdom instead of money, I will answer every time. If he asks for money instead of wisdom, he will hear the answer I should have given long ago. Silence isn't love. Boundaries are. And the only way our family becomes a family again is if each of us lives inside that truth long enough to grow into the people we were meant to be. It cost us years. Evening settles over the garden in a soft gold that makes the rosemary shine. The new herbs stand like small green promises, and the roses show a faint pink as if they remember her hands. Inside, the house smells like bread cooling on the rack. I slide the cruise ticket into Margaret's favorite book and set it on the table where morning light will find it. The dates look steady on the page. The map feels close enough to touch, like a window finally opened. I ladle stew into a wide bowl and place it on the oak. I butter a slice of bread and add it to a small plate. Then I set a second plate halfway down the table. Not for Timothy, for hope that knows its place and keeps good time. I pour water into 2 glasses and sit, tasting time, letting the quiet be what it is. The chair across from me stays empty without accusation. The room accepts it the way. Gardens accept dusk. When the dishes are washed and set to dry, I open the box behind the mantel and take one of Margaret's candles. The wick accepts the match and steadies. I turn off the light and let the flame do the work, warming wood and glass. Outside, the feeder sways once and rests. The house breathes in, breathes out. I sit beside the candle and feel the silence turn kind again, bright enough to keep, gentle enough to share for a while. Your turn. If your grown child skipped a parent's funeral and still expected support, would you pay or press cancel? In the comments, tell me where you'd draw the line, what words you would use, and what consequence finally made change possible. Share the moment you realized silence wasn't love and how a boundary protected your peace. If this story resonated, tap like so it reaches someone who needs courage tonight. Subscribe for more true to life tales where dignity is defended without shouting, and turn on notifications so you never miss when consequences arrive. I read your stories, and many of you are teaching others that no can be a gift. Tell a friend who is carrying a burden that isn't theirs. Ask them the question that changed Otis's world. What would happen if you stopped enabling and started telling the truth? Next time, the stakes twist again. A tenant with forged papers claims my house is theirs, and the law seems to agree. I'll show you how I gathered proof, called the right people, and turned the key on a lie. Do not miss it. Comment your city, your time zone, and one boundary you'll keep, starting today, bravely.